There are rumors that she's interested in running herself for president next time around, or maybe after that. So maybe this is part of her a political calculation on her part to reframe to sort of to reframe her character and her personality to make it more palatable to a broader audience. So we'll see. It's still early days in this Marjorie Taylor Greene transition.
Hi, I'm Jo Crawford, and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. Today, I'm joined by Lewis Lukens, former acting US ambassador to the UK and now senior partner with Signum Global Advisors. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again.
So, President Trump has made a U-turn and called for Republicans in the House to vote for the release of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein, as the president claims he has nothing to hide. Why do you think that he's changed his mind?
Well, a couple of points. I think on the House side, regarding his message last night, it's sort of inevitable. I think he saw the momentum moving against him, that there were enough Republicans and Democrats who would vote for this petition to release the files. And I think instead of sort of suffering a loss, he decided to sort of to change his attitude or his point of view about it and say, just release them or vote for it. So that way he looks like he's not losing. The issue is there are a couple of things worth pointing out here. One is that if it passes in the House, it still has to pass in the Senate. And it's not clear that there are enough Republicans in the Senate who would vote for that. And then it would go to the White House if it passes in the Senate. But the other point is that if Trump wanted these files released, he could do it. The only reason that there's this movement in Congress to push for the release of the files is because the Trump administration has refused to release them. So if Trump really wanted these files released, which is what he was kind of indicating last night in his U-turn, he could do it this morning.
And it's interesting because Trump, he asked for the FBI and Pam Bondi, who's the Attorney General, to look into Epstein's relations with the former President Bill Clinton, as well as other Democrats too. And isn't there a problem that if there is an ongoing investigation to this, then those documents can't be released, can they?
I guess they could make that argument. I think, part of this is just Donald Trump deflecting attention, right? Just sort of pointing the finger at somebody else. I think there's probably very little doubt at this point that Donald Trump is somehow or somewhat implicated in these files. And so, but there's a scenario where the Department of Justice redacts enough of the mentions of Trump that they can release the files and Trump is not necessarily implicated. And we've seen over the course of the last, 9-10 months that the Department of Justice is very willing to do what Trump asked them to do. So the idea, the Department of Justice should really be sort of an quasi-independent, autonomous, organization that doesn't bow to political pressure. That's always been the way the Department of Justice has worked. But under this administration, we see an attorney general who's very willing to do the president's bidding. And I think in this case, that's what would likely happen.
I mean, how would you say that these Epstein files have impacted Trump's reputation with his MAGA cohort over the last few months? I mean, we had the release of the House Oversight Committee. They released tens of thousands of emails that were from the Epstein estate, which included lots of direct references to Trump. And although Trump has denied any wrongdoing, and there hasn't been any evidence so far that's directly linked him to any wrongdoing too, I mean, would you say that this drama around the Epstein files has still impacted him reputationally?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the polling, the MAGA cohort isn't that bothered by it. They, on the one hand, they want the files released, and they think that the government should release the files. But when you ask them about it and you throw Donald Trump's name into the mix, they're less inclined to have it released. So basically the MAGA base, which is really part of the part of the Republican Party that has been so focused on the conspiracy theories about Epstein, has kind of moved on from Donald Trump's role in that. And I think Donald Trump has been very effective, as we said earlier, in deflecting attention, pointing to Bill Clinton and other prominent Democrats and saying this is a hoax, this is Russia, Russia, Russia all over again. And his base, they listen to him and they believe him when he says that kind of thing. So, whereas the base, I would say, a couple of years ago was really fixated on these files, Trump has been able to kind of, push them in a different direction, the way that he's approached the files.
I mean, on the other hand, we've got Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was once seen as being a big Trump ally, one of his closest allies, but she's sort of recently broken away from Trump, especially in regards to the release of the Epstein files and other issues. But we saw Trump come out and he said that Greene was a traitor and a disgrace. And the Congresswoman's gone on to say that these comments made by Trump have put her life at risk. She is saying that the breakdown of this relationship between her and Trump has stemmed from her support for the release of these Epstein files. But do you see the two of them repairing their relationship now that especially Trump's come up and said that Republicans should vote for it?
Well, never say never with Donald Trump, and certainly when you throw someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene in the mix too, there are many, instances of people who were on Donald Trump's enemy list and who then end up coming around and becoming friends again. So, I wouldn't rule that out. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is really interesting. I mean, she has obviously made a conscious decision to completely change her persona almost. I mean, she's gone from, being this sort of vicious attack dog for Donald Trump to reaching out across the aisle to try to be bipartisan. She had an interview yesterday on CNN where she was pushed on the fact that she had sent pretty tough text messages and sort of promoting violence, and she said, "I humbly apologize. Like that, I'm not that person anymore." So we'll see. It's I think it's a little bit early to say how genuine this complete sort of personality change is for Marjorie Taylor Greene. There are rumors that she's interested in running herself for president next time around, or maybe after that. So maybe this is part of her a political calculation on her part to reframe her character and her personality to make it more palatable to a broader audience. So we'll see. It's still early days in this Marjorie Taylor Greene transition, but it is a very interesting fact. And the fact that Donald Trump, I mean, she was a huge supporter of Donald Trump's. I mean, she was by his side through thick and through thin for a long, long time. And the fact that he has so quickly turned on her, I think is fascinating. I'm not sure it's only about the Epstein files. I think, and especially now that he's come out and said, to the House Republicans, go ahead and vote for it. I don't care. We'll see. Maybe that tempers a little bit his anger at Marjorie Taylor Greene.
It's interesting what you're saying there about looking towards the future, because the Republican Thomas Massie, who's been leading efforts for the vote for the release of the Epstein files, in a recent interview, he said that for this Epstein vote, Republicans will need to look past 2028 and wonder if they want this on their record for the rest of their political career. So do you think that there are a lot of Republicans, including Marjorie out there, who are thinking of, a future that's post-Trump?
From Marjorie Taylor Greene's perspective, yes, and I think there are certainly some Republicans, most of them thinking this more quietly, like with their inside voice, not their outside voice, like Thomas Massie is. But clearly there are many in the party who are thinking about the party beyond 2028 and what does it look like without Donald Trump. I think it's a little bit they're a little bit optimistic about sort of the party without Donald Trump, because Donald Trump will not be the president any longer, but it's very easy to imagine a scenario where he still controls the MAGA base and he sort of sits down at Mar-a-Lago and is the kingmaker behind the scenes, pulling strings and sort of organizing the party, even though he's not in the White House anymore. So I think it is too soon to write off Donald Trump. And right now, looking ahead to 2028, the presumed heir to the throne is J.D. Vance, who will obviously, I think, continue a lot of the MAGA policies that Donald Trump has been pushing, although, in a slightly different way, obviously. But I think there are people in the party who, especially people like Thomas Massie, who are sort of true blue conservatives and who do not like some of Trump's policies, sort of putting aside the personality and the way Trump behaves. But they're fiscal conservatives who see an administration that is spending a lot of money and not worried about the debt and the fiscal and the deficit, who would love to move beyond Donald Trump and get back to a more traditional sort of small government, pro-business kind of Republican Party. The question is, and this is something that we talk about a lot, is can the Republican Party ever go back to its roots and to that kind of party? Or has Donald Trump and the MAGA movement changed the party sort of forever? My guess is it has changed the party forever. It's never going to get back to what it used to be, say, 20 years ago. But what it looks like is not necessarily a pure MAGA party. I think there's a different iteration of the party coming down the road.
Looking towards the future with talks about JD Vance potentially going for presidency himself, how do you think that his affiliation with Trump and his steadfastness with siding by Trump, do you think that's going to have any impact on him further down the line?
I think so. The challenge for JD Vance will be after the midterms. So after the next a year from now will be the midterm elections. We'll see how the Democrats do. They probably will take control of the House, and then at that point, Donald Trump basically becomes a lame duck. And that is also the point at which after the midterms, when all the primary races really start for both parties. So the Democrats will have to pick a candidate, and the Republicans will have to pick a candidate. On the Republican side, it's a little bit more clear cut. Marco Rubio apparently wants to run. There are some other Republicans who will run, but as the sitting vice president, with presumably and apparently the president's endorsement, JD Vance will be in the strongest position. So he's most likely to be the candidate. And then the challenge for him will be over the course of those 2 years until the general election to wrap himself in all the things, all the Trump policies that are popular with the Republican base, while trying to distance himself from some of the things that aren't so popular. And it's very hard to distance yourself from Donald Trump when you're sitting down the hall from him. So we'll see how JD Vance is incredibly intelligent and a very smart politician. So I imagine he'll figure out how to do that. But it'll be very interesting to watch. He will have to sort of twist himself in some contortions to do that.
So it appears that the House will be voting tomorrow to release the files, and as you said, it will also need to go through the Senate for approval too. But if this bill passes, what would a release of these documents look like? What does that entail?
Well, I think if it's released because of the congressional action, then that means that the Department of Justice theoretically will release this trove of emails, I guess, mostly emails and other documents to the House, to Congress, where of course they would all quickly be leaked and go public. And as I said earlier, there's a good chance that major portions of it are redacted to protect the privacy of people, including probably Donald Trump if he's in there. So we've already seen a release last week of some documents. It's unclear. I don't think anyone besides people in the Department of Justice really know how much is left unseen and what's in there. A lot of it is pretty salacious, but not necessarily career ending. But we'll see. I mean, Republicans and Donald Trump clearly are hoping that there's really terrible information about Bill Clinton and other Democrats. I think a lot of Democrats believe there's incriminating evidence against the president. So it'll be a big deal when it's finally released. But again, a lot will depend on how much they redact.
I want to turn now to the BBC. The broadcaster has told Trump lawyers that it would fight the lawsuit. This follows Trump and his lawyers suing the BBC, saying they're going to sue the BBC over the panorama edit of his speech on Capitol Hill on the 6th of January. And the BBC are claiming that the panorama episode didn't damage the president's reputation, as people in America were not able to watch it as it was restricted to UK viewers. Do you think that Trump will pursue legal action against the BBC? But also, how do you think this is going to impact relations between the UK and the US?
So I think Trump will pursue legal action. He's clearly a very litigious man, and he likes to go after the media. He's done it in the United States successfully, but these cases generally end up being settled. So Trump gets some kind of payment out of it, and that's probably his goal here. If the BBC hangs tough and refuses to settle, and I know there's questions about where they would even get the money from to settle. If they refuse to settle, then it's unclear to me whether Donald Trump continues to pursue it or drops it. He's big on the bluster and come out of the gates really strong with big threats, and then hope for a financial settlement quickly and easily. It's unclear to me that BBC will allow that to happen in this case, and I think at some point Keir Starmer may have to get involved and try to explain to the president that this is harmful, but I'm not sure Donald Trump cares that much. I mean, he is. Look, I mean, he's doing a lot of things while he's in office to sort of build his personal wealth for his post White House days, whether it's through crypto or countries approving Trump organization projects, all those kinds of things have really blurred the line between the, you know, the presidency and personal gain in ways that have never been done before. And I think part of Trump's strategy with these lawsuits is to, just get more money in the door to his bank accounts. So, you know, if Keir Starmer were to call the president and say, look, I'm asking you as a friend or as a favor to please drop this case, I'm not sure that's going to have much effect on Donald Trump.
Do you think it in any way exposes flaws in the way that Keir Starmer has been approaching Trump? When things have been said in the past that it appears that Starmer doesn't agree with, he sort of kept quiet rather than challenging the president, hasn't he?
I mean, my view is that Keir Starmer has done a very good job of managing this relationship. And if you're going to disagree with Donald Trump, if you're Keir Starmer and you disagree with Donald Trump, you have to do it in private. Any public rebuke of Donald Trump by Keir Starmer would be met immediately with angry Truth Social, posts and a deterioration in the relationship. So I think my view is that Keir Starmer has been right and has been smart to express any misgivings behind closed doors. I don't know that he has done that, but to the extent if he has done it, to do it privately is the way to do it. And I think, in general, the broader approach, the invitation to the state dinner, I mean, all that stuff plays to Donald Trump's interests and desires to be sort of seen and to be wrapped up in the royal family piece of it. And so I think Keir Starmer has done a good job, and he got a pretty good framework of a trade deal for the UK out of it as well. So, I don't think, my guess is that Keir Starmer is not going to want to rock the boat or upset this balance that he has achieved by pushing too hard on the BBC issue. But of course, that doesn't take into account domestic pressure that Keir Starmer will come under to stand up for the BBC. So he will have a tough, balancing act to carry out there.
And how would you say that this story's gone down in the US? Because, in the UK, obviously, it's been a big story because the BBC is huge here. But, how do people in the US feel about it?
It's not a huge story here. You're right. And as you know, there's not a huge viewership in the United States. And I think for many people, they kind of shrug and think, oh, well, here's Donald Trump just doing what he always does, which is sue the media anytime they say something that he doesn't like.
We're expecting to have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia visit Trump in Washington tomorrow. This is the first time that a Saudi Arabian leader has visited the US since the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. What do you expect to hear from this meeting?
So I think expectations are not that high. I mean, first of all, the symbolism of it is important. This is, as you said, it's the first visit. It's essentially, excuse me, it's not technically a state visit because MBS is not the head of state, his father is. But for all intents and purposes, it is a state visit. I mean, they're getting the black tie dinner at the White House, the full meeting. It's very much the format of a state visit. So for MBS and for the Saudis, this is a huge deal, a huge win. We don't think, there's some speculation that, and Trump has hinted that Saudi may be normalizing relations with Israel. I don't think that's going to happen. Saudi Arabia has real issues for not wanting to do that yet based on Israeli policies, and that's not going to change between now and tomorrow. The U.S. will agree to a defense agreement with Saudi Arabia, similar to what it did recently with Qatar, where it provides some assurances of defense cooperation. Saudi will probably agree to buy lots of high-tech American weaponry. So there'll be some sort of a defense cooperation agreement. I don't think there'll be Saudi Israeli normalization, or Saudi Arabia is not going to join the Abraham Accords. And there won't be sort of a broader treaty-like agreement with Saudi Arabia because the treaty, of course, has to pass in the Senate, and there are not the votes in the Senate for an agreement like that with Saudi Arabia. But there'll be a lot of pomp and circumstance, a lot of talk about Saudi investment in the United States. Trump likes to get these foreign leaders to publicly commit to huge levels of investment in the United States. Whether they actually come through at the end of the day or not doesn't really matter to Trump. It's the announcement and the fact that he can claim credit for it that's important.
And what I thought was interesting was that Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of the other things that she sort of found issue with Trump is the fact that she questioned his America First approach with this second term. And she said that he needed to have more focus on domestic issues rather than foreign deals. So, how do you think that this meeting with the Crown Prince will go down with not just Marjorie, but other Republicans who are also having similar queries with Trump?
Yeah, probably not well. I mean, I think there is definitely a part of the Republican Party and the MAGA base um, that believed that Donald Trump was going to really focus on them and their priorities domestically, and not spend so much time working on international issues. And Trump has actually, he's been traveling. He was in the Far East recently. He's had a lot of meetings with foreign leaders over the course of the last couple of weeks and into this week, and plus skirting with some kind of military engagement in Venezuela. There are a lot of things that MAGA are unhappy about based on that, and there are advisors around Donald Trump who recognize this, and they see that he's vulnerable because of this. So there's also a big focus coming up that we'll see this over the course of the next couple of weeks on affordability. I mean, Democrats did very well in the off-cycle elections 2 weeks ago because people felt that Donald Trump had promised to lower prices and he hasn't. And that is benefiting Democrats and will continue to benefit Democrats heading into next year's midterm elections. So for Donald Trump and his policy people around him, they recognize he needs to do more to draw attention to what he is theoretically doing to lower costs for Americans. So they're rolling out a whole series of domestic travel and speeches for him to focus on the economy. The challenge for them, of course, is that Donald Trump goes off script, right? He might have a beautifully crafted speech talking about the economy and affordability, but when he gets up on stage and you put a mic in front of him, who knows where he's going to go with that. And so the challenge for the White House is to try to keep him focused on affordability and to get off of things like the Epstein files and Marjorie Taylor Greene and all these other personal beefs that he has.
Well, Lewis Lukens, thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report today.
Great. Thanks, Joe.